As I entered the hospital room, dressed in my crisp white lab coat, I took my place next to the pathologist. He was explaining the instruction. He was explaining the procedures to the patient. Then we were ready to begin. He carefully sterilized an area on her chest, and then took his instrument, a 4-inch long, large bored needle, and forcefully thrusted it into her chest. I averted my eyes. What I could not avert, however, were my ears from the blood-curdling screams that followed. Screams that seemed to suck all the energy out of the room. Screams that seemed to suck any compassion he had out of his heart as he maneuvered and manipulated that needle around in her sternum to obtain a bone marrow sample. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm here to inspire you to do anything and everything that you can so that you don't ever find yourselves in a similar situation. Because what happened that day in that hospital room isn't really what changed the trajectory of my life. The trajectory of my life was changed when I brought that sample back to the laboratory and told the technologist the story, whereupon she looked at me with sympathetic eyes and said, "But Leslie, you know they don't even treat leukemia in patients that old." It was in that moment that I knew that the last 4 years I had spent in my life learning medical laboratory technology was just going to be a backdrop for the rest of my life, because in that moment I saw that there wasn't a single thing I could do in my current position to do anything to keep her or anyone else from ever having to go through a similar situation. So today I'm here to give you some tips and some stories that will hopefully inspire you to keep yourself and those that you love happier and healthier. So the first thing I have for you is this: to make the foundation of your diet fresh, ripe, raw fruits and vegetables. The foundation of the average American diet is basically animal products and starches. We know those cause inflammation. Those are basically what leads to the fact that 80% of the people in this room, given no changes, will die of a chronic disease. And what a chronic disease basically looks like is a slow and steady spiral downward, punctuated by what are sometimes called the 3 Ds of aging: disease, disability, and doctors. So if you don't want to be there, a big part of that is switching over from that meat and potatoes diet, or a version thereof, to making the basis of your diet mostly fresh, ripe, raw fruits and veggies. And yeah, you can have a little bit of animal products or a little bit of starches, but try and keep them to less than 10% each of your diet. The second thing that I have for you is to move more. Did you know the human body has over 700 muscles in it? Our bodies were designed for movement. It's estimated that our hunter-gatherer, cave-dweller ancestors used about 5,000 calories a day just to survive. Our bodies were designed for that. So move more wherever you can, whenever you can, wherever you can, and however you can. The third thing I have for you is to explore superfoods. Superfoods are a group of foods, and if you're not sure which ones they are, ask me, I can get you a list. They're a group of foods that have a very high nutrient density, and each one of them seems to have important things that we don't get in our diets in any other place. So bring superfoods into your life, bring a variety of them, and actually in terms of variety, also think in terms of variety in your diet so that you're eating across all the colors of the rainbow, and you're also eating foods when they're in season, because our bodies were not designed, for example, to eat fresh, ripe, sugary fruit all year round. They were designed to eat it at a particular time, and that's what's going to keep us the healthiest. A couple of attitude suggestions for you as well. Number one is to be open to alternatives to medicine. Several years ago, a little boy named Kelsey, who was about 6 at the time, entered my life and my practice. And Kelsey had severe asthma. And his asthma seemed to be triggered by the weather, specifically by rain. So during some of the winters, during some of the bad winters we had a few years ago, Kelsey found himself in the hospital 3, 4, 6 times in a season. His mom was referred by a friend, brought him in, and Kelsey was doing well. He was progressing fine. About 6 weeks or so into our care plan, we had made some diet changes. Mom had backed him off his medication. Things were going well. One warm, sultry summer afternoon, it was kind of a weird day because it was August, but we had had this rainstorm that morning. And I was in the office that afternoon. Kelsey came in for his adjustment, and I said to Mom, how's Kelsey doing? And she looked at me and she burst into tears. I said, what's going on? And she said, today is the first time since Kelsey's been alive that I didn't know it was going to rain, because Kelsey hadn't had an asthma attack that morning. So be open to alternative forms of care, because lots of times those alternative forms of care will provide you more care, better care, and actually the byproduct of that will be better health rather than all the side effects you get with medication. The other thing that I have for you, lastly, what I have for you is a little bit of advice to follow the advice of people who follow science and whose advice makes sense. Here's what I mean. There's a lot of confusion out there about what constitutes a healthy diet. I'm going to pick on one particular thing, and it's the paleo diet. The paleo diet purports to tell us that if we eat grass-fed beef and wild game and raw milk and lots of eggs and a little bit of veggies, basically no fruit and no grains, we're going to be healthy. There isn't a whole lot of science that supports that. The reason the paleo diet gets results is because of 2 other things that they do. They get people off processed food. They get people off of pulverized grains or flour. You get people off of those things and people feel better. But when you look at the longevity, people that are eating that high amount of animal products are going to have a higher cancer rate. They're going to have a higher heart disease rate. And they will tell you that that we have higher heart disease and cancer rates because we're eating altered animals, because of how animals are raised. But if you look back 2 and 3 generations, people were still dying actually at a higher rate of cancer and heart disease than they are now. So it has little or nothing to do with it. I know that there's a lot of science behind, basically, there's a lot of science behind there's a lot of science behind eating fruits and vegetables as the basis of your diet. And that the Okinawans, the Japanese, and the Chinese, and all sorts of other cultures, that their diets support that, and that's how you can remain healthy for the rest of your life. I want to tell you also a story about a friend, patient, and client named Ruth. Ruth is 84 years old now, and she's been a friend, patient, and client for close to 20 years. Ruth has listened to the advice of people who, in my humble opinion, and not just my advice, but in my humble opinion, give good advice, and give advice that's backed by science. Ruth, at now 84 years old, is pretty much single-handedly taking care of her 97-year-old husband who has end-stage Alzheimer's, and she's doing it in a way that isn't really adversely affecting her health and well-being at 84. So I think that has something to say for her taking the advice and the kind of advice that she's getting. So in conclusion today, I hope that I've inspired you a little bit to clean up your diet, add some superfoods to it, and get some regular exercise, and be open to alternative care. Most importantly, I hope I've inspired you to keep keep seeking advice and learning from people who look beyond the science, who look beyond the headlines with a critical eye.